So, we're doing a video from Lindsay Gibson and on the Remothering Summit, which is from Simone, Vivi, Hadjigeorgalis. She's one of the experts on the show, and I'm excited because this is our final one from the series. I think this is our third video together about this topic. So Lindsay C. Gibson, is an expert in what she calls emotionally underdeveloped people or emotionally underdeveloped parents. And she says that they can stretch to interact in a situation at a certain level, but if they're getting what they want, but then they revert back to their form, which can depend on if they are topped off and things are going their way and feeling good about themselves. And emotionally developed people can sometimes regress. Also, she makes this comment that also emotionally undeveloped people can sometimes regress if it's extremely stressful. Or it can also depend on if they're hungry, tired, feeling opposed, but then, they revert back to form after they lose that topping off. And so you can see who someone really is based on how they act in these situations, where their emotional immaturity or their egocentrism comes out. And there's a few things she talks about. What is emotional immaturity? So first of all, when we say egocentrism, we're not saying somebody doesn't have an ego in order to be emotionally mature. We're saying the person's unable to self-reflect. They are so centered in their ego that they can't come from their self and even see their ego. So an ego desiring to protect them, make sense of things. So then obviously they can't take accountability for anything. Once we are past this point in our ability, it's hard to believe that someone else cannot do it, but we have to accept that they're not there yet, even though they have this language skills that make it seem like they can understand the meanings to what we're talking about. So again, we're talking about the experience of being centered in ego versus centered in ourself, which watches the ego. It's basically the false self. We're identifying with it. So we identify with the emotions, we blame others for emotions. Okay, now I'm talking about things that she didn't say. So developing a complex enough self is the way to be able to stand apart at the side and look at yourself. So you can be complex enough that you have all these different parts, and you could stand in one part and see another part, and you realize you have angles. And someone who's emotionally immature will always be blaming. That's what I started touching on a minute ago, that always needing to be center of attention. They cannot self-soothe, and they cannot build their own self-esteem, and they take everything personally. And they also cannot adjust to reality, as it is out there, like the real world, versus wanting the world to change. So sometimes something that we have to adapt to or shifting gears in order to handle it, but they would rather have conflicts with reality. So this we would call, and look, we're not saying anyone is completely emotionally immature or mature. So I already relate to a number of little things here that I'm working on, or that I have been working on, or that I grew up in, or in my parents, or in men that I wanted to be with. So this idea that the ego copes by denying or distorting reality, because you obviously cannot force reality to adapt or adjust or shift to what I want, my needs or agreements. Like if I want the sky to be closer so I could touch a star, just like being extreme for, just for making the point, someone's not in the shared reality. And you can tell whether or not somebody's willing to accept, how things actually are. There's also this existential crisis situation where the person is like, am I still here if no one's looking at me, if I'm not being given attention, if I feel ignored, or you ignored me, rather than, even if it didn't happen, it's how I'm perceiving things. So you might not be ignoring me, but I feel ignored. I would like to say, full disclosure, I had a first boyfriend about 10 years ago, and he told me that he called this object permanence. When something is not in sight, that it still exists, is part of the developmental phase of a child. He said that I didn't have that with my parents, that when they left, I would feel safe that they were going to come back. And now he may be right or wrong, he might have been projecting on me, but what that really touched in me was this sense that if the person is not there, did they forget about me? And as a child, it's dangerous to be totally forgotten about, left behind, fallen through the cracks. And I do feel that sometimes I am still healing from things in my childhood, and that could be one of them, possibly. So another is unable to tolerate facing feelings of shame or guilt. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like feeling ashamed, and I don't like feeling guilty. I felt really embarrassed that I got betrayed in a sense, like it was like me coming closer, someone coming closer, and we were like enjoying, and then suddenly he like wasn't interested, and I was like still trying to come closer. I didn't realize yet, and then he was like mocking me kind of for this desire to want to come close, but we had done a dance. I didn't get that close on my own. It was like him and me and him and me. So I felt pretty hurt. I felt ashamed of misinterpreting the situation, and I felt guilty also for like, when I felt like, oh, I had totally misread the situation, maybe I had made him uncomfortable and he was just being polite, or I felt like even guilty, like maybe I felt used, but maybe I'd been using him, and all along he was never like actually coming closer. It was just because that's what I wanted someone to be doing. So, I didn't like those feelings, but the fact that I could feel the feelings of guilt and shame is what we would call emotionally maturing. So emotional maturity brings us to the point where maybe even I'll be able to laugh at myself, laugh at all of this. I could see that there's some humor in it, but I didn't feel that way right when it happened. I still, being someone who feels like I don't know if I cry every day, but just being somebody who like tears is really a great processing tool. So I feel like, this idea that like I get it out, these peak emotions with the it's not quite compartmentalized, but there's like a period of time every day, especially when I consider like my communion with my creator who created my life and created these situations. So it's like the sense that in our emotional maturity, we can create enough distance from it happening to us personally and seeing where maybe we went wrong in such a way that it's kind of silly. Can we laugh at ourselves? And this is also a big difference from mocking people and making fun of people to laughing at ourselves. And then can we make amends? Can we apologize? What do we do after we make a mistake? And also this idea that we will, have ruptures in our trust in our relationships. That is normal. It doesn't mean that we're immature. But how do we rebuild that connection? Like, could we reunite by building a bridge after a break or a rupture? When we look at discord, it's an opportunity to model the return to harmony. And that's part of emotional maturity, believe it or not. There's also this ladder of tools, which all of us start primitively, and we're learning and growing, and we can transform and we can respond. So this ability to transform and respond in a increasingly more and more capable way is emotional maturity. And finally, personal growth allows us to disentangle. So if we're emotionally mature, we will become entangled with emotional takeovers and emotional coercion. So let's talk about that. But personal growth is how we emotionally mature. So emotional takeovers are when we feel flooded or stunned by someone else's affect, their emotional experience. We cannot think, we're dissociated, everything becomes an urgency or emergency about their feelings, and it's out of control, really. Then we have emotional coercion, where there's shame or guilt or self-doubt or fear used to obligate the other person. Like, we've all heard of somebody guilt-tripping somebody, shaming somebody, confusing somebody. Now, people have heard gaslighting as a way of saying confusing, and even intimidating somebody, which is fear. So this is a moral dimensional component. It's to do it and be it if we want to think of ourselves as good person. In other words, they're using accusations like something's the matter with you, or you're cold or unloving or selfish. It's exhausting or draining. So because they're telling us about who we are and there's something wrong with us, versus them learning how to make requests, accepting our no, I won't do that, or I can't, and not automatically vilifying us emotionally, like black and whiting the situation. So like, it doesn't mean I'm unloving just because I didn't want to do the thing that you said at the moment, or because I said maybe a criticism, and it's also exhausting and draining to never be caring enough, and the care is not appreciated. So we have to recognize that, by nature we want to help, but it doesn't feel worth it because they never get filled up. They never say thanks, I've got it now, and then we can feel satisfied that and rewarded in the sense that we oh, we did a good job, we helped someone that we care about, we were there for someone we love. There's none of that reward. It's never like checked off. It's never like appreciated. But if we didn't do it, we would still be mischaracterized. It's like a lose-lose. It's like, for us on our end, it's like lose-lose. You help them, you lose. You don't help them, you lose. Maybe catch-22. So if you don't help them, they're going to characterize you as the bad guy. And if you do help them, you don't get that sense of fulfillment from it, because the sense is that you didn't actually empower them. They're just going to need you to do it again or the next thing. So there's this sense you're dealing with somebody who's people have called it like demonic. What they really mean is a black hole energy. Like, they're not really a black hole. They're just, there's a black hole of their self. They're avoiding parts of their self. They've created these black holes, which could happen within an hour. I talked about in a previous video. Black holes can occur in space in an hour. In less than an hour, a black hole could occur. So, you know, you could confine that to a few minutes probably. It could happen even. Maybe less than half an hour, a black hole could emerge. So there's black holes in the psyche. Now, they implode on themselves into singularity, and it could be nullified. That's how I feel. But it's like, you know, the sense like this empty vessel, or they have a leak, right? They need a bond enough with their self that they're not in their ego, which is clearly, as we're saying, not satisfied. No matter how much you'll do for it, it's not enough, because it's not filling them up in the way that they really need that inner fulfillment from that they would probably get if they did it for themselves, or they love themselves, respected themselves for how they behave and what they do. But they're sort of like it's like cloudy. They can't see because they're in their own darkness of their self. So that place is void of light. But if they would only shine their own awareness into that area, but then maybe we have to assume that this person is emotionally underdeveloped. They've not developed yet. So in a way, by being real life for them, by being reality, saying no, we are giving them a chance to mature. Now back to what she says. She says if we might get, if we don't do what they want and we're mischaracterized, we also might be talked about behind our back or treated like a disappointment. And it's the sense, you could tell, like what the feeling is. It's like, well, what have you done for me lately? Rather than seeing the bigger picture. It's also not reciprocal, and we cannot go to them for the emotional stuff or the support and receive, you know, the attention and help from them that we need in life. And even though they claim that their self-sacrifice is not there, but they claim like, oh, if you like, they make it seem like if we would self-sacrifice, we would be a good person. But it's only when it suits them, not when they have to do it. Suddenly, like it's their self-sacrifice wouldn't make them a good person. Another emotional maturity also is immunity against getting entangled with, and personal growth is also immunity against getting entangled with emotionally immature people. But because we individuate, we make a self-connection where we take care of ourselves, and then we cannot get as exploited by, or at all exploited by people who want us to take care of them and building a self relationship where we can be free of brainwashing. And I don't think brainwashing is a bad thing. I would almost say we're getting immunity by brainwashing ourselves so that we won't be brainwashed by the other person. It's not like, we call it in Hebrew, hefker. Hefker means like ownerless. Like, it won't be ownerless. We're taking responsibility for ourselves, enjoying ourselves, and not just holding ourselves together, but actually learning and growing, which is like an integrated structure. So it's not just we're holding pieces together and someone could like come in because it's not really, but we're like actually becoming cohesive and interdimensional beings. And we don't worry so much about the feelings that we have, and we can be ourselves and not suppress our thoughts and perceptions. It's just basically becoming a grown-up, growing up in the self, as ourselves. Feelings are also normal. Anger, obligation, guilt, and coping mechanisms to feelings, to handle feelings, also what we might call adaptations. They could be, you know, beneficial or not. Sometimes when they're not beneficial, we call non-beneficial adaptations maladaptive behaviors or maladaptations, because mal means not beneficial or detrimental, really. It's normal to have coping mechanisms. They are all different kinds, everything from reflexive caretaking to hyper-independence. So on the one hand, just automatically fixing, helping, and on the other hand, like cutting everyone off and like not being vulnerable and not trusting anyone. So you know, which comes from the discomfort of asking for help. It could be perfectionism, and that includes a whole series of symptoms. And then people pleasing is another, which is not the same thing as reflexive caretaking. It's actually just trying to make the other people happy with you. And also there's achievement orientation, which is often in the Western culture as, you know, competition and, you know, in the capitalist society, but also even in Eastern countries like Japan, where you have to be constantly achieving in order to feel like you can handle your feelings of basically, in order to cope with your feelings, you can keep achieving and getting more degrees and getting more accolades and accomplishments. Emotional maturity is also being allowed to consult with ourselves before we compulsively assist another person or put them before ourselves. We might need to take a moment of presence and, take a presence of mind, really, and see how we feel and what it's going to cost me, instead of just saying yes. And when we really don't know yet, we see the person struggling and we're like, oh, I would love to help you, I could help you, but actually to see if it's something we can do. There's also anticipation as a high level of coping mechanism to imagine not only what will result from doing this, basically once you're thinking through what it's going to cost you, you're using this experience of anticipation, and it's a high level of coping. So not only what will result from doing this or giving into this demand, and figuring out how it will go down in the future, but also being able to know how it's going to feel for me. So being able to step aside for a second and thinking, basically becoming the bigger person. You're parenting yourself in a way, and you're also being willing to be almost like the parent for this other immature person who, like we said earlier, it's like the idea of give a man a fish and they may not even be happy with the fish, and then they may keep asking you for a fish, or teach someone to fish on their own, trusting that if they could do this for themselves, should you do it, and so on and so forth. A few more things here. One is that the hope here is really that we have a choice about how we respond. That's what our hope is for ourselves. And the other 2 points is, one is every disrespect, no matter how small it is like a small paper cut, as they call it, death by 1,000 paper cuts. They add up over time, and no slight is too small to count. The violation threshold was crossed. So Michael Buber says I-it relationship instead of I-thou, when there is someone who says or does something to us as if we are a thing or we do it to others. And then you say, I feel used, I feel like an object, I'm not being treated like a human. Eventually these can kill us inside, like thinking about a version of us. I don't want to say the whole self, but there's a part of us that keeps getting violated. It will want to self-destruct. I mean, thinking about people who hurt themselves, literally cut themselves or press the self down with alcohol, food, drugs, or anything else. It's just to keep on being treated like an object without feeling as if the person matters. It's like you feel like you're not real, you don't matter. It's like the very existence of the person is being invalidated, and they're not important or deserving of attention. And the person can say whatever they want, and there's nothing wrong there's nothing wrong with them, and there's something wrong with you if you would want to object or have feelings about it. And the final thing I want to share from Lindsay Gibson is that intuitively we know when we're being treated in a way that promotes our growth and health and when we're not. And our life force demands us to be aware of this in order for us to flourish and thrive. And this will guide us to what is needed. So she really leaves off on an empowering note that in the end of the day, this emotional maturity comes also from just trusting that it is a process and that it is a part of life, and our intuition will guide us towards the growth that we do in our true nature really want to have, wherever we are on this emotional maturity, spectrum or journey. So that's all from Lindsay Gibson on the Remothering Summit, and I look forward to the next video. Bye-bye.